So let's talk about something wild. What if I told you that some of the sharpest tools for modern skepticism weren't invented by atheists or doubters, but by deeply devout believers who were just trying to win an argument? Yeah, we're heading back to the 17th century, to an absolutely epic intellectual battle, a holy war of words that had consequences no one saw coming, shaping the very way we think about truth today. And this question, right here, it gets to the heart of the problem that was tearing Europe apart after the Protestant Reformation. See, for centuries, if you had a big question about God or truth, the Catholic Church was the final word, the referee. But once the Reformation shattered that authority, it was a total free-for-all. Suddenly you had all these different claims to ultimate truth, but no one could agree on how to prove who was right. It was a genuine crisis of certainty. And this whole crisis, this massive debate, it all boiled down to one fundamental question. Where does religious authority actually come from? Both sides, the Protestants and the Catholics, were 100% sure they held the key to divine truth. The only problem? They were using two completely different keys. So let's meet our two contenders. In one corner, you've got Team Protestant. Their champion is the principle of sola scriptura, which basically means scripture alone. For them, the Bible and only the Bible was the perfect, infallible source of truth. And in the other corner, you have Team Catholic. Now, they totally agreed the Bible was crucial, but they argued you couldn't possibly understand it without tradition. And by tradition, they meant the centuries of writings from the early church fathers and all the official decisions from church councils. For them, tradition was the essential instruction manual you needed to read the Bible correctly. Okay, so if you're on Team Protestant, your game plan is pretty clear. To win this fight, you can't just talk up the Bible. You have to actively tear down the other side's source of authority. You have to prove that the Catholic reliance on tradition was built on a foundation of, well, sand. And that's exactly what they did. They launched an all-out intellectual assault. The core weapon in their arsenal was, of course, sola scriptura. And the idea behind it is really simple but incredibly powerful. If the Bible is God's perfect, clear, and self-evident word, then what else do you need? Anything else, like tradition, is just human, which means it's flawed and a potential source of corruption. And the man who really systematized this attack, who turned it into a science, was a French Protestant minister named Jean Daillet. Now, this guy wasn't just a theologian. He was a brilliant historical critic. He decided he was going to take the tools of modern scholarship and turn them against the very foundation of the Catholic argument, the writings of the early church fathers. And Daillet's case was just devastating. He went through it point by point. He argued, look, so many of the original texts are just gone, lost forever. What we do have, he said, is riddled with copying errors, bad translations, even some outright forgeries. On top of that, their language is so obscure it's nearly impossible to know what they meant. And the worst part, they're constantly contradicting each other. So this whole Catholic idea of a beautiful, unified consensus of the fathers, Daillet argued it was a complete and total fantasy. The result of this attack was absolutely brutal. The Protestants managed to paint the entire legacy of the Church Fathers not as a source of wisdom, but as this confusing, unreliable swamp, a morass, as they put it, where any honest search for truth was just doomed from the start. It was a powerful blow. But, this fight was far from over. The Catholic side was definitely on the ropes, but they had a brilliant and, honestly, a pretty dangerous countermove. They thought, okay, you want to use historical criticism on our sources? Fine. They decided to take that exact same weapon and aim it right back at the Protestants' core belief in sola scriptura. If tradition was such a mess, they asked, was the Bible really as clear and simple as everyone claimed? And their champion in this counterattack was a Jesuit scholar named Denis Pitot. Just like Dyle, he was a master of critically analyzing historical texts and language, and he set his sights on the Protestant stronghold, this idea that the Bible was clear, self-evident, and easy for anyone to understand. Pitot's argument, in a nutshell, was this: the Bible is anything but clear. He meticulously went through it, pointing out obscure passages, apparent contradictions, and deep ambiguities on the most important topics of faith. His whole point was that without the guiding hand of tradition, without the church to interpret it, the Bible itself could be a source of endless confusion and error. So let's just pause and see where we are. We've got a total intellectual standoff. The Protestants have successfully made the case that tradition is a hopeless, unreliable mess, and the Catholics have successfully made the case that the Bible, all by itself, is dangerously obscure and ambiguous. In a way, they had both won their arguments. And that is exactly when things got really, really interesting. Because this is where the story takes a fascinating twist. Neither side really saw the ultimate consequence of their own victory. In trying so hard to destroy their opponent's foundation for truth, they had, completely by accident, done serious damage to their own.
Historians have a great name for this, a reciprocal erosion of authority. The best way to think about it is like two guys in a rowboat, arguing. Each one decides to punch a hole in the other guy's side of the boat to sink him. Well, they both succeed, and now the whole boat is going down.
So let's just break down how this theological backfire actually worked. Step 1, the Protestants land a huge blow, convincing people that tradition is unreliable. Step 2, the Catholics fire back and convince people that the Bible is obscure and confusing on its own. So what's the result? The devastating result is that suddenly, both of the foundational pillars of Christian authority looked pretty shaky. You can almost visualize what happened. Imagine a graph of how certain people felt about these texts. Before this whole debate, their followers would have put both sources way up high. But after this intellectual war, the perceived certainty of both had taken a serious nosedive. The texts themselves hadn't changed, of course, but people's confidence in them had been deeply, deeply wounded. And when those massive traditional authorities start to look weak and questionable, well, that creates a vacuum, doesn't it? A space opened up for a whole new kind of thinker. Thinkers who were ready and willing to take the critical methods these theologians had developed and, well, apply them to everything. I mean, you can literally watch this progression over the century. It starts in the early 1600s as kind of an internal Christian debate. By the middle of the century, it's a full-blown intellectual arms race. And by the late 1600s, you have these radical new thinkers like Spinoza, who take the exact same critical tools and use them not to defend one version of faith, but to question the entire basis of religion itself. And that right there, that is the ultimate mind-blowing irony of this entire story. The sharpest scalpels for dissecting and questioning sacred texts, they weren't created in some skeptic's workshop. No, they were forged in the fires of faith itself, by passionate believers who thought they were creating the ultimate weapons to defend their own truth. So it leaves us with this incredible question to think about. In their desperate, all-out war to establish absolute religious certainty, did these theologians accidentally make widespread doubt possible for the very first time? It seems like the road to the modern age was paved, completely unintentionally, by the very people trying to defend the old one.